Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. So we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Ernest Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our video. The Duke Blue Devils just got some pretty big roster news with the announcement that a solid piece to the backcourt in Tyrese Proctor is returning for next season and foregoing the 2024 NBA draft. I'm going to go over whether I believe that Tyrese Proctor will be a big piece to the Duke Blue Devils roster next season and how the Duke roster is looking overall. Now, Tyrese Proctor, he had an up and down sophomore season for Duke this past year, and that's probably why he is deciding to come back, because as a freshman, he averaged 9 points per game, 3 assists, and 3 rebounds, but he only shot 32% from 3 and 38% from the field, which isn't that great. And when you are a guard, the NBA wants you to shoot better from the outside and from the floor if they're going to take you in the draft. And then as a sophomore, he averaged 10 points per game and around the same rebounds and assists. And he did up his three-point shooting percentage a little bit and his field goal percentage, but he really struggled in the NCAA tournament down the stretch. He played well against James Madison, but against NC State in the Elite Eight, he had 0 points. He was very disappointing in that game, but that doesn't mean that he had a bad season. He still was a solid player for Duke in a crowded backcourt and with a loaded roster overall, still found a way to pick his spots. But why it's big for Duke that he's coming back is, for one thing, if he decided to test the NBA draft waters, then Duke was going to have to wait on him to determine whether he was going to return or not, and Duke would have to find a way to possibly be able to replace his position if he did decide to leave. But now, knowing that he's coming back, Duke doesn't have to worry about that anymore. They know that he is in their corner, that he is coming back for next season, so that's big. And I think that Tyrese Proctor is making the right decision, because even though there is an argument that he would have gotten drafted, he's probably not ready for the NBA, and maybe he is taking the right approach, following in the footsteps of Jeremy Roach, who's kind of been a borderline player for the NBA the past few seasons, but he hasn't decided to go pro yet, and he still hasn't. We don't know if Jeremy Roach is going to leave this year for Duke. He could come back because he has that extra year left due to the pandemic, but he also could go pro because he has improved every season at the Duke Blue Devils. And maybe Tyrese Proctor is a guy that realizes that sometimes if you aren't completely ready, coming back, trying to be able to have a lot of success at Duke, get a lot of NIL, and get a solid education at Duke is a very important thing. And on 3, they announced that he is coming back for the 2024-2025 season, so it is official. And Duke, they've got a fantastic roster already lined up for next season, because not only do they have a lot of guys still currently on the roster that we don't know what they're going to do, they also have this loaded freshman class. It's the #1 ranked class in college basketball that was ranked well over every other team's recruiting class except for the Kentucky Wildcats, but Kentucky's recruiting class is falling apart since Jon Calipari is going off to Arkansas, which some of those guys could follow him to Arkansas to give them a great class, but Duke still has the best class at college basketball with Cooper Flagg, who everybody's talking about because he could possibly be the #1 pick in the 2025 NBA draft and probably the best freshman in college basketball next season. Then they've got 3 other 5-stars in Isaiah Evans, Con Newpel, and then Kaman Maloch that everybody cannot wait to see, the 7-foot center out of Africa. He is going to be a stud, I think, next season for Duke. And then they got 2 other guys in Patrick Nganga and Darren Harris, and all of these guys are very talented, even though it is tough to adjust to the college game. We've seen so many freshmen lately with all of these seniors and juniors returning to college basketball. It makes it tougher for these freshmen to adjust, but with the amount of talent and the amount of freshmen that they are bringing in, it is very important for the Duke roster to have experienced guys on the team coming back, and that's where Tyrese Proctor's addition is very important, because Duke has been a team that has done a better job of keeping older guys on the team than the Kentucky Wildcats have, and that's why Duke has made deeper runs in the NCAA tournament recently than Kentucky has with Jon Calipari. Kentucky only had Antonio Reeves and they had Trey Mitchell, but outside of that, everybody else was very young. And Duke this past season, they had Jeremy Roach, who was experienced. They had Ryan Young, who was an experienced transfer from Northwestern, and they also have Mark Mitchell, who was a sophomore, and Kyle Filipowski. Now, I will say, though, Duke's going to have to figure out who's returning and who's coming back, because Christian Reeves and Mark Mitchell, they're already in the transfer portal, and somebody has to leave because Duke is actually over the roster limit, which is a great problem to have. Being over the roster limit and having to basically push guys out the door because you got too many great players, that is definitely not a bad situation to be in. It stinks that you got to let some good players go, because Mark Mitchell was a very solid player, and I'm actually kind of surprised he was one of the players that left, but Duke was definitely going to have to lose players. I had a few Duke fans telling me that nobody from the Blue Devils roster was going to transfer, and I'm like, some guys are going to have to transfer. When you're bringing in all all of those freshmen, and you've got so much talent still on the team, and not all of these guys are going to be able to declare for the draft. Of course, some guys are going to have to leave. And Kyle Filipowski and Jared McCain, those are the two guys that are most likely to declare for the draft and probably stay in the draft, because McCain had a very good freshman year, and he got hot down the stretch of the season, especially in the NCAA tournament, where Tyrese Proctor didn't really show up in the tournament. Jared McCain definitely did. And Kyle Filipowski, he was a sophomore this past season, and he improved in all areas of the game. He still has to get a bit better shooting the three, but he got better in the pick and roll. He's a good enough free throw shooter, and I believe he is going to probably be at least a top 20 pick in the draft. He should probably go. And if both those guys leave, then I don't really believe Duke's going to have to add anybody else to the roster, because I think they would be at their roster limit of 13. But some of these other guys could leave. Guys like Sean Stewart, TJ Power, who are both freshmen, Jaden Schuett, who is a sophomore. But that doesn't mean that they will leave. If all of those guys stay, then that could really help out the Duke Blue Devils next season, because of the fact they could end up getting better and improving Jon Scheyer's system with another year in college. But Duke could also have these players leave, and then the Blue Devils could bring in even more talented players through the transfer portal. But like I said, that's a great problem to have. I think for it to look good for the Duke Blue Devils, a lot of these guys should come back so they could try to develop them instead of just kicking them out the door after their freshman season. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the Blue Devils roster. But with whatever happens, Duke's going to have a talented roster, because with all those really good freshmen coming in, and if you get guys like Jeremy Roach back, and you already have Tyrese Proctor coming back, that's huge. I don't think Jared McCain and Kyle Filipowski are going to return, but that's fine. You don't have to have them return, because even though it would be great for them to come back, that would really hurt some of the freshmen that Duke is bringing in to try to get some playing time. Not everybody can get minutes. There's only 5 positions on the floor, and even though Duke's got tons of talent, guys like Jalen Blakes, who had a bigger role a year or two ago, he didn't play either. Maybe he's another guy that could leave as well, even though he is a more experienced guy, so it could help Duke if he returned, but we'll have to see there. Jon Scheyer, he took Duke to the round of 32 in his first season as the Blue Devils head coach, took him to the Elite Eight this past year, even though it was tough that they lost to NC State. But with all this talent coming in, Duke fans want a national title. The Blue Devils, they are a program that wants national championships, just like the Kentucky Wildcats, so much so that when you look at John Calipari leaving Kentucky for Arkansas because the fan base, it was just too much, he decided, I want to go to a job that has less expectations, less pressure. I got the Tyson Food Group billionaire on my side, and I'm going to have a fan base that's going to be happy with me as long as I take them to tournaments every year. Jon Scheyer, he doesn't have that luxury. He's with a fan base that wants to win and wants to advance far in the tournament. And when you have all this talent, there's really no excuse for you not to make deep runs and go to Final Fours and win national titles. Scheyer did go to the Elite Eight. That was very impressive. But the biggest way to do that is you have to have the right blend of freshman talent, the right blend of transfers, and the right culture guys that are going to come back to your program year over year and get better. I believe Jeremy Roach was that type of player. We'll have to see if he comes back. If he does, that would be huge for Duke, but it doesn't seem like he will since he participated in senior night, but we'll have to see. But I think Tyrese Proctor is a massive return for Duke. He's not a perfect player. He has a lot of things he needs to improve on, but hey, that's great. At least he didn't enter the transfer portal like Mark Mitchell did and Christian Reeves and probably a couple other players might do for Duke. Proctor is a pretty solid player that still has room to grow, and I believe for the Duke Blue Devils, it was the best thing for him to come back and help the Blue Devils possibly be an even better team next season. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, what you think about Tyrese Proctor returning to Duke and whether you are happy he's coming back and whether you thought he was going to declare for the draft or enter the transfer portal or come back to Duke, and whether you believe that Jon Scheyer has the Blue Devils on track pending what happens with the rest of their roster and what decisions they make. If you think the Blue Devils could end up being an elite team next season, subscribe to the channel if you like sports content, like this video down below, follow me on Twitter as well, link is in the description, and I will see you next time.